Hello, welcome to part 3 for solving the UGC paper for June 2014 examination in psychology. So we'll start onwards with question 31 today. So here is the first question that we would be doing. Now, in this section, the questions we would be covering today, like the first two questions that we would be covering are based on a kind of rote memory. So let's understand. The scientific management concept was given by Taylor. Taylor is indeed known as, he wrote the book of Principles of Scientific Management, and he gave this concept in 1911. After that, there was Munstenberg, who talked about humanization of job in 1913. So he gave the concept of humanization, under which he talked about the psychology and the industrial efficiency. That was the name of his book, where he explained this concept. The next was Gilbreth, who gave the concept of time and motion studies, where he talked about the worker's mental and physical strength, and he talked about how to increase the industrial output. So this Gilbreth gave the concept when he was in a controversy with Taylor, and this concept arose in around 1914-15. And then you have Mayo, who did the Hawthorne studies from 1927 to 30. So that's the correct order for the things to follow. So it's basically first, then you have third. So first and third, you have the A choice, that's correct. Now next, Gardner's theory of multiple intelligence. We know multiple intelligence concept was given by Gardner, and he talked about 8 separate abilities. Those were logical, mathematical, then you have verbal, you have musical, then you have interpersonal and intrapersonal, that is within yourselves and with other people. You have spatial, naturalistic, and bodily kinetics. So these are the correct set of things that Gardner talked about in his theory of multiple intelligence. This is again a question that's based on memory and learning. So these two questions, as we said, are direct questions. If you know the concept, you can answer those. This question is a bit hard because remembering the years is not that easy. But I would suggest that for these kind of questions, just try to remember a few things. First is any recent innovation in the field of psychology. Okay, major phenomena that have happened. The year of major phenomena, for example, the year of classical conditioning, operant conditioning, or if you could either remember the chronological order of some of the major psychologists. If you know that Taylor came before Mayo, we can say that okay, Taylor's theory might have been propounded before the Mayo's theory. So these two questions we solved with this technique. The next question is a kind of application-based question. Now let's understand this question. A parent deliberately ignores a child's temper tantrums in an attempt to discourage those. This strategy is known as. So for example, if you are paying attention to something again and again, what you are trying to do is you are trying to reinforce that behavior. Okay, but if I am just ignoring something and I am not repeating that behavior again, that is known as extinction. Okay, that means that behavior happened in some part of time and slowly and gradually vanished off. So this was the next question that we discussed today. Now let's move on to the next set of questions here. The next set of questions, the first question here, we moved on to a different slide. Let me switch it off. So you have the next set of questions here. So here are the questions. Now, the first question here is you have to arrange these 5 events in the order from top to bottom. So let's see how this works. Now, to understand this, let me first try to introduce a very basic concept here. The very basic concept here is we are trying to understand the neurosecretory processes which help to release hormones and finally stimulate the organs. Okay, so here what we understand is that neurosecretory cells. Okay, these are the first that are stimulated. Your nerves are stimulated first. Once the nerves are stimulated, okay, in the nerves you have kind of two nucleus, both which lie in hypothalamus region. So hypothalamus region of the brain, when it's stimulated, it tries to release the gonadotropic hormone or the corticotropic hormones, and these hormones slowly and gradually diffuse into the anterior pituitary system. So what happens here? The hormones here are mainly the oxytocin and the vasopressin. Okay. So what happens is these two hormones, when released, they stimulate the pituitary gland. So you have first is the stimulation of secretory cells. Then you have release of corticotropic hormones. That leads to stimulation of anterior pituitary. Once the pituitary is stimulated, the gonadotropic hormones release and they finally stimulate the ovaries. So it's the first is the correct order here. Now there are various things. There was in paper 2 we already discussed a question on problem solving. Now here it's a bit tricky question because it talks about which strategies facilitate the concept of problem solving. So what is focused here is the word facilitation. Facilitating means making it easier and simplifying it. Okay, so that is what is facilitating. Now let's understand. Which of the following strategies facilitates problem solving? So algorithm, what I try to do is, I try to solve the problem step by step. So I am simplifying. For example, there is any mathematical numerical. If I directly give you the answer, you won't understand what was the concept. But if I logically, step by step, help you solve that question, you will understand it better. So algorithm is solving the problem step by step and it facilitates the problem solving behavior. The next is analogy. Analogy, what does it mean? If you have solved something previously, okay, and you know the solution for that problem, you can apply that solution to a new problem. So if I've done something previously, I can apply that knowledge or that solution to a new problem situation. So that is what is analogy, and that helps you to solve the problem much more quicker. And finally is heuristics. Heuristics is the rule of thumb in a very simple way. It's a kind of rule of thumb that helps you solve problems. Okay. Now the next set of questions here. The next set of questions here talks about the various attitude skills and the basic features of those attitude skills. Now let's start with this one by one. So first let's talk about the summated rating. Summated rating helps you assess multi-dimensional attitudes. Okay. So summated rating was devised in opposition to the equal appearing scales and the Thurston scales, and it said that under summated rating you can measure many number of dimensions of attitude. Okay, now which scale, as we know, was given by Thurston is the equal appearing scale. So Thurston under the equal appearing scale talked about the suitability to scale large number of items. If I have very large number of items, I can check out those items under the equal appearing scales. So I can use a huge data set. Then you have the paired comparison. What happens in paired comparison is, paired comparison, I am trying to see which of the pair dominates. So who dominates, which is more prominent, which has more of it, which wins over. I am discussing things like that. Okay. So when I am talking about things like that, I am trying to employ Z as a measure of scale value. So when with paired comparison, we talk about Z as a measure of scale value. And finally, scalogram given by Gutman talks about unidimensionality. And summated rating talks about multidimensionality. So these were the next set of questions that we talked about today. Now let's move on to the question. The next question here we would be talking about is, it's a kind of very simple and a kind of simple conceptual question. Now, we all know who is a psychiatrist, psychologist, and a social worker. Let's first understand this. Psychiatrist. Psychiatrist is a person who has done a doctorate degree or a medicine degree and is basically providing drugs to the patient suffering from psychological disorders. Psychologist, on the other hand, is a person who tries to understand human behavior and solve the issues related to human behavior. Social worker, on the other hand, aims to work for upliftment of society. Okay. Now let's read this question. A social worker with a degree of MSW has been appointed as an assistant to psychiatrist to administer and interpret Roche's test. Roche's test is a kind of projective test. This practice is ethically incorrect because under a psychiatrist, who should be appointed? A psychologist. And a psychologist has a right to administer the Roche's test. So this is kind of ethically incorrect practice. Now next question. The next question is on learned helplessness. Let's first understand the concept of learned helplessness before we solve this question. What's learned helplessness? Learned helplessness means there is a failure to learn how to respond to a situation. For example, I have a child who is, for example, say 3 years old. Okay, and I send him to the school for the very first time. If he cries a lot, that's normal. If he has problem in adjustment, that's normal. But if he says, I am completely unadjusted to this behavior and I do not want to turn back and stand in front of a crowd of another 20 or 60 students, what has happened? What is happening is that child is facing a kind of failure to learn to respond to the situation individually because he is in a habit of being with the parents always. So he is unable to respond to that situation independently. So that is what is learned helplessness. Now the question here is, learned helplessness may appear when the stress is. So the correct answer is when you are feeling uncontrollable. Okay, when you feel that you are going to fail and no one can help you out. So that's a kind of feeling of uncontrollability. And since you are not able to adjust in that group, you try to withdraw from that group and you feel apathetic to the group. So 3 and 4 are the correct reasons for the stress that appears due to learned helplessness. Okay, these were the two questions which are kind of simple questions but a bit conceptual questions. Now let's move on to the next question. The next question here talks about, first is the assertion reason question here. Now we are talking about anxiety disorder. What is anxiety disorder? And we are talking about negative evaluation. So these two, to be very sure, are two different terms. Now let's understand the difference first. Fear of negative evaluation, what does that mean? If I am a professor at a college, for example, or a university, I'm going to university for the very first day to take the class. And I was a bit hesitant about my class and I did not perform that well, which I should do. So what thought I might have? Oh, I had a very bad impression with the students. Students must be thinking that she's not a nice teacher or something. Okay, so I try to make negative evaluations about myself, thinking that others are thinking negatively about me. Okay, so that is what is fear of negative evaluation. First of all, fear of negative evaluation occurs only when you feel that others are thinking negatively about you. Okay. When you feel that others are thinking negatively about you, you have a fear of negative evaluation, and That fear of negative evaluation has nothing to do with anxiety disorder. Anxiety disorder, on the other hand, is a kind of cognitive process or a process of understanding where you have certain dysfunctional beliefs. This should happen, this should not happen. I'm afraid this might happen. I'm afraid I might reach late at the function. Okay, so I think I might not be able to attend the function today because I'm not feeling well. So those are all kind of anxiety disorders. I might miss my train today. So it's basically you have a dysfunctional belief, which is not a correct functional belief that happens, but it happens. Okay, so that is what is anxiety disorder, and this anxiety disorder is different from fear of negative evaluation. So here we can say that a statement A is incorrect and reason is correct. Now, the next question. Dash arises when one is simultaneously having two inconsistent. Now to answer this question, the correct thing is cognitive dissonance. What is cognitive dissonance? Cognitive dissonance, the concept was basically explained by Mayers, where he said, feeling of any tension arises when one is aware of two inconsistent cognitions. So its tension arises only when one is simultaneously having two inconsistent cognitions. What does that mean? This implies that I have to go to school today, okay, to take a class, okay, but I have to go to hospital today uh, to for a important visit, okay, important doctor's visit. Now, what is happening here is, for me, I have supposedly 10 vacations from the school. I have used all those 10, and now it's compulsory for me to go to school because I need to take class. I cannot take a leave. All my leaves are done. And on the other hand, I have taken a doctor's appointment and I need to visit the hospital. Both of them are kind of inconsistent cognitions. I have to do both the jobs together. So what happens? Before I come to any solution, the first thing would be the tension that would arise due to two simultaneously inconsistent cognitions that are appearing together at that point of time. Okay, so this is basically a concept that was propounded under the cognitive dissonance theory. Now the next question here is, arrange the following events in the order of occurrence in a panic circle. Now before we do this, let's understand the panic circle. So Clark was the person who gave the concept of basically the cognition concept of panic. So here is the circle that was propounded by Clark, and Clark basically emphasized that there is importance of misinterpretations of fear sensations. So whenever I am having any sensation, there is a very high probability that I might misinterpret it, and even if there is nothing to be afraid of it, I might get afraid out of it. Okay. So these are the things that happen here. So first is a trigger stimulus. A trigger stimulus that happens or that brings a kind of ignites the match. When I'm talking about igniting the matchstick, so that is a kind of trigger that leads to a perceived threat. This threat causes apprehension or irrational fear about something. This might happen, this might happen. These apprehensions create body sensations, and finally you try to interpret these sensations. So this is the correct order. First you have the trigger, okay, then you have the perceived threat, then you create apprehension or worry or irrational tensions about it. That leads to body sensation, and finally interpretation of those sensations. So this is the correct order or the correct sequence of things that happen. Now we'll talk about the next question here. So the next question here is, person's response on MMPI was disregarded because he has scored high on frequency subtable. Now, before we understand this, first understand what is MMPI. Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory is a kind of personality inventory that has been created to judge the personality of the people. It has 10 clinical scales and 4 validity scales. Okay. The first validity scale is the lie scale. Lie scale talks about understanding whether a person is speaking, intends to avoid answering the questions honestly. So that's lie scale. Then you have the F scale, that is frequency subscale. So this frequency subscale detects unusual behavior while answering the questions. So for example, if I'm trying to randomly mark A on all the answers, this validity scale will check the frequency of those unusual behaviors and try to take those into account. So that is what is the frequency subscale, and it indicates the style an individual is responding in a typical manner. Okay, the next scale here is back frequency, which is similar to F frequency, but it happens only during the last half of the test, not the starting half. So even if you are checking the last half, you can know whether a person is doing some unusual behavior or not. Finally is the K scale. What is K scale? K scale is a scale where you are trying to identify the psychopathology of the people. Okay. So these are the 4 validity scales in MMPI. So we can say both the statements are correct, and reason is the correct explanation for this question. Now the next is the model of Mayer and Salovey model. Now what was Mayer and Salovey model? That was the 4th branch model of emotional intelligence. Okay, this model, under this model, what he tried to do was, he tried to explain the various areas of emotional intelligence. So under this model, he talked about 4 areas. First is accurately perceiving the emotion. Okay, so first almost you should accurately perceive the emotion. The next is use the emotion to facilitate it. Okay, so emotions can be used to facilitate the thinking process. The next is understanding emotion. I'm trying to understand the emotion, and finally I'm trying to manage that emotion. Okay, so 1, 2, 3 and 4, all of them are correct here. So these are the components of emotional intelligence. Now the next question, there is an inverted U-shaped relationship between job stress and performance. That's correct. That's the Yerke-Dodson law. According to the Yerkes-Dodson law, you have an inverted relationship between the two. And the next statement explains that job stress generates arousal and motivation for making effort. So here is the performance curve given by Yerkes-Dodson. So you have performance on one side and the stress on one side. We can see that this behavior is calm initially. Then you have under stress, you perform most optimally. So this keeps your performance at the highest level, highly energized, focused, and work feels effortless. And finally is the distress, where you start feeling fatigue, exhaustion, ill health, or breakdown and burnout. So that's the phase of distress. The initial phase is calm, where you are trying to seek improvement and going upwards. So that's the typical inverted U-shaped curve that we talk about regarding job stress and performance. The next question is a very, very important question. This question is related to aging, first of all. So there are various theories given for aging. Now before we solve this question, let me explain the 3 basic theories of aging. What is the 3 basic theory of aging? First is the variable theory. Variable rate theory talks about damage that occurs due to chance errors or environmental issues. That is kind of early graying of the hairs, for example, I can say. It's a kind of variable rate theory. You cannot give a exact reason as to why this happened, but there can be any environmental phenomena or any personal experiences that led you to early aging. So that's kind of variable aging theory. The next theory is the wear and tear theory. Wear and tear theory. Under wear and tear theory, we say that as you age out, a number of your body parts starts to decline in functioning and activity. So it's slow and gradual decay and degeneration of the body. And finally is the free radical theory. Free radical says that there are free radicals in the human beings which can damage the cells of the body. Okay, so these three are the basic theories that are propounded on aging. Now, the body ages as a result of accumulated damage to the system beyond the body's ability to repair it. That's a kind of correct sentence. Okay, because we know that it is due to the accumulated damage beyond the body's ability to repair it. So what theory we are talking about is wear and tear. Okay. The next theory in the next question here is aging involves damage due to environmental assaults on biological system. What theory we are talking here about is it's due to kind of variable rate theory or error theory. Okay. What we can understand by these two statements is in both the statements we are talking about the various theories of aging. First is the wear and tear theory of aging and second is the variable error theory on aging. So both the statements are correct, but they are not the correct explanations for each other because they are independent theories which are given on the concept of aging. Okay, so with this we complete all the 15 questions of today's session. Hope these questions were very clear and the explanations were like kind of help you to form answers or solve answers for the coming set of papers. It will give you an idea as to focus on which sections of the syllabus and what kind of questions come in the syllabus. So have a good day ahead and stay tuned for the further sessions. Have a good day.